Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape.
Welcome to Straight Shot Politics, coming to you from the MEC TSC studios. I'm Lisa Chafee.
And I'm Josh Cease.
And I'm Michael Nash.
Josh, I'm really excited because we have live in studio with us Senator Andrew Brenner, representing State District 19.
Yeah, actually, and I've talked to Andrew. Back in the old days, my radio days, he would text me in the middle of the show, and he'd be like, no, actually this, and like, I'd be like, he was a great insight. So it's really nice to finally get to meet you in person, Senator Brenner.
Nice to meet you as well in person.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, you are a great resource, and one thing I've always enjoyed about talking to you is you are not a phony. It's very genuine how clear you come through and how authentic you are in that. And as conservatives here in the state of Ohio, there's some phonies in that legislature, some of your colleagues, but you're not one of them. So I want to thank you for your commitment to being authentic.
I appreciate that. No, I'm a straight shooter with upper management written all over me.
Great quote.
Favorite movie that I had actually working. I was in the mortgage industry for many years, and we were in cubicles. So I felt like I was in that world for quite a while and making lots of phone calls, and we didn't do TPS reports, but I was in the lending industry, so it was about as bad. So anyway, but yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you and everything that you did and are doing now. Actually, I think we need to get these conservative voices out and spreading them through, podcasts and just talking exactly what we think. And I try to do that. Sometimes I'm a little too blunt, but I try to be fair. I try to be straightforward, and I try not to sugarcoat it, because I think if you try to do it a certain way, it ends up not working, and that's kind of...
Well, and I know from my personal experience, I met you a few years ago when I first started testifying at the State House for bills on education, and you did not hesitate to take my call.
Correct.
And I have friends who I have referred to you having problems, and it may not be within 24 hours, but at least within a couple of days. And we really appreciate that, because there are quite a few state reps and senators who won't take our call.
Which I don't understand that. I mean, I even gave out, like today at a thing I attended this morning, I gave him my cell number. I gave him, my office number, my email, and all that. But I said, if somebody really wants to and they really need something, they can reach out to me. Even if they just send me a text, or, if I'm in a meeting, it'll go to voicemail, but I'll try to follow up as quickly as I can. So...
Well, and that's the thing. People love to, complain and say the system is broken. But how many take the time to actually reach out to their local representative? People, you're not going to get a phone call through the White House to the Oval Office, right? But what you can do is you can focus on a local level where it matters, where it makes an impact, where literally sometimes a half dozen votes can decide who's the state senator and who isn't. So when you offer that, people need to take advantage of that, because that is how you get involved in government. That's how you become we the people and take control and get involved on that local level. So otherwise, the bitching and moaning, if you're not trying to reach out the best you can to the resources you have available, like you as a state senator that's offering your cell phone, I really don't want to hear the complaining.
That's right. And sometimes we've cast some bad votes. I think Rob McCauley has been going around as the lieutenant governor candidate for Vivek, pointing out the fact that we did, and I voted for Amy Acton. That was a bad vote. But that actually ended up leaning and changing procedures in the Senate, where we're now even scrutinizing, yes, the Republican nominee, and he's one of our party, but we're now going to look at certain key positions a lot more closely. Now, some of the boards, that they're not going to be looked at, and actually some require Democrats and Republicans. But but listening to the constituents, we've had some bills here recently. There was a bill that a lot of people were upset about recently. I think it was Senate Bill 174. I hear about it the day of the vote. If I'd heard about it a week or two before, I could have talked to the bill sponsor. I met actually with somebody yesterday who has been opposed to it. This is a bill dealing with judicial issues around custody matters. And it was created by the Judicial Conference. A lot of the bill was actually just moving a section of law around to another section because one section had been removed. And it really didn't change the law much, but there are advocates that want that section of law changed. And one of them was in my office yesterday. I'm like, well, you know what? If you guys actually push the shared parenting, I would probably hop on board with that. But that wasn't what this bill was. And then, sometimes doing things at the last minute, and maybe they were talking to the members of the committee, actually, although several of them that told me said, it moved a lot faster than they expected. So, but we have two chambers. So guess what? They're working on it in the other chamber. I talked to the bill sponsor, Teresa Gavarone. She's one of the bill sponsors. She's an attorney. And they're going to work with it in the House. And, they'll make changes. And I think that our constituent base will be okay with going forward.
I actually opposed that bill as well because of one part that would allow a judge in a situation where you've got either both parents or one parent who doesn't want to allow their child to go down the transgender route, that the judge could override and just go with whatever they think is best.
See, and Lisa, that's a point that I think if we had known about. So what happened was I think there ended up being 2 no votes on the floor, and that's only because I think Senator Rogner actually called somebody on the floor, right? Texted, and then she and Michelle Reynolds were sitting beside each other, and they voted no. But that's a case where, it was a bill. It's in the committee process. We normally get the bill ahead of time, usually a week or two. This one happened to be a day before. I think there was some scheduling issues, and it went out. But again, we have another chamber. So in this case, I think that those types of issues will get addressed. I believe I heard that talking with Senator Gavarone that I believe Josh Williams is working on some stuff over there. So we'll see. And I think that bill will be improved. And you're right. I would not want to have a position where one parent is going to be pushing, that their kid has to be transgender. Number one, the science isn't there, and it's clearly coming out. It's been coming out that way, even in Europe. But that is going on. And I will tell you, I remember this was 2 years ago, and Josh, I may have even mentioned this. I was sitting in committee as chairing education, and we had one of the bills coming through the committee, and these parents were coming in and talking about how their 3-year-olds, the 3-year-old boy knew he was a girl. And I was just, not to say shocked, but I think a lot of us were, and what do you tell this person? I'm not going to argue with her because she clearly is down the line that she believes this is the science and everything else. I'm not going to change her in a committee room.
Right.
But we went ahead with the bill and passed it. I think this might have been one of the bathroom bills or something. But those are the kind of things you deal with when you're dealing with the public. And then you're also dealing with what the left has done, which is just brainwash people. They say follow the science and then don't follow the science ever.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, my 3-year-old, if she had her druthers, would have Reese cups and ice cream for dinner every night, but that's not the way it works. I do want to ask, we are in a gubernatorial year.
Yep.
I know that has an impact on the way maybe certain things do or do not get introduced in the legislature. There's a lot of, who's going to be doing what and who's going to want to do this. And obviously, you guys, there's a lot, there's going to be turnover within both chambers and so to speak. So I'm just asking, what is the difference? What is it between like a year like this where we know our current governor, who I have not been very fond of, but whatever.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's leaving, and we're going to have this battle between Vivek and Amy Acton. And I guess my question is, how does that change the day-to-day operation within the legislature? Because the gubernatorial race it doesn't just suck up time and effort upon the two candidates. There's also, people within the legislature out champion their person or trying to figure out, okay, if Vivek gets elected, what could be on the agenda for next year moving forward? How does that change in a year like this?
Great question. So, but you have to look at this in the fact that this is the 8th year of Governor DeWine. He's termed out. He's lame ducked. So his power has basically diminished. He'll have a State of the State address next month. He'll have some ideas, and I've heard some of them sound like they're fine, but he's not going to be able to carry the bully pulpit as like a governor in their first term and their very first part of their term. So you've got a 2-year General Assembly coming up, 137th under Vivek Ramaswamy. He'll be able to hit the ground running. So what we as legislators are doing are saying, okay, what bills can we introduce that we know probably will not pass in this General Assembly, but are good concepts that maybe we can, incorporate in the next General Assembly and maybe work with the next governor on. And this goes on. I mean, this went on, when I was in the General Assembly under Governor Kasich. Kasich was great in his first term. I mean, he had some major reforms. We did a lot of things, and then he ran for president, and it just kind of fell off the rails. And so DeWine came in, and the first thing that hit is this pandemic, or a year or two in, and the pandemic hits. He follows Amy Acton, which some governors do, and he's more of a he likes government kind of a guy. I'm a let's get as much of it out as we possibly can kind of a guy, and so he relied on that. She led to some policies though that we're still trying to clean up 5 years later. And, especially these kids really reading problems, comprehend, just everything there fell apart, and we have not recovered it. So we're looking at, okay, so we got tax problems. We've got, maybe property taxes are a little high. And I'm being facetious. They're very high. They should be lower. We need to cut them. We need to find ways to streamline government more. So I think these ideas are being put in as concepts. I know that Dave Thomas, the state representative, who's a former auditor, he led the charge on the bills that the governor did sign. Governor initially vetoed some of this stuff in the budget, but then he put his own study committee together who recommended pretty much everything that we'd put in the budget. So, and that came from another committee that also recommended it. So regardless, he did sign them. So those at least passed. So going forward, the taxes won't go up as quickly. And we do have now budget commissions that will have some oversight over whether or not these levies are too big. But we've got to put concepts in place to help the next governor so that then he can use the bully pulpit. The one that really gets the stuff done is the governor. And if he's got the bully pulpit, he can lead the General Assembly to get things passed. But he needs allies in the General Assembly to do that. And if he doesn't have the allies, then, we could be in trouble. And this is why this election year is very pivotal. And from my standpoint, looking at it, you've got this, Husted is the incumbent, but he was appointed. And Sherrod Brown's been there. They're going to put the Democrats, the left wing, the unions, they're going to put a boatload of money. And yes, Husted's got some union support, but the left knows they need this U.S. Senate seat. Now, we do as well. So I think there's going to be a boatload of money spent in that. Mm-hmm. And the reason I believe Sherrod Brown, everything I heard, is running for U.S. Senate is because he knew he couldn't raise the money for governor. So I think Vivek has a very good shot of winning governor. But if Sherrod Brown puts in a big fight, he's kind of at the top of the ticket there. That will help their entire ticket. Could it help Acton win? Maybe. Could it help somebody like an Allison Russo win Secretary of State? Possibly. And what we don't want to see is a Democrat take over that position, especially because then our elections, anything we pass that's election reform-wise, she just won't enforce it, or she'll enforce it in the most liberal way possible. And I know how these bureaucrats work because I've been now trying to deal with them and fight them, especially in the Ohio Department of Education workforce for years.
It would theoretically, and I apologize if I come across ignorant for asking, but you have to show an ID. Would there be a way for her to go to battle to fight and say, all right, no more in the state of Ohio do you have to show an ID to vote? Because we know that's the Democrats' ultimate goal is to completely ban voter ID in all 50 states so they can get their people elected through whatever means necessary. Illegals. Excuse me. So my point here is, would she have any, if she is Secretary of State, Fundamentally, what could she actually change without the support of the legislature and the governor signing off?
How you enforce it, specifically administrative rules, because she oversees the Secretary of State's office. If Allison Russo were elected there, that would be a problem. And the thing we have with government, and we've tried putting reforms in even under Governor DeWine for going back to structured literacy and the science of reading and comprehension. Well, if your local school districts and boards aren't enforcing it and aren't getting the changes, because there are several districts that aren't, or they're dragging their feet, then it won't happen. If you've got bureaucrats in the Department of Education workforce that are like, well, maybe we can do this or that. Now, I think at least the leadership in there is doing the right thing. And so Dakin, I think, is doing everything he can to try to get the changes. But you've got layers of bureaucracy in our agencies, our local levels that are stymied. So getting back to the Secretary of State, she's got tons of employees that oversee that department. They're going to interpret things, and they're not going to interpret things the way we want them to, which will probably cause lawsuits, which will end up in the courts. They'll probably have last-minute decisions, which is why it was important when we changed a few years ago, adding the R's and D's at the ends of the names for the candidates running for Supreme Court and Appeals Court. We actually put that in the budget to do that for local school boards. Governor DeWine vetoed it. So we're now going to try to run those bills separately to see if we can get them to the governor. Again, I don't know if he'll sign that, even if we send them to him. And if he does, do we have enough to override him? That I don't know. The Republicans control it, but we've got Republicans and then we've got moderate Republicans, or in many cases, some would call them rhinos, but you got to deal with that. And those are the dynamics that go on in the General Assembly. So, we can always pass a bill, but the bureaucrats can interpret it however they want.
So speaking of election reform, you introduced a bill, Senate Bill 293, that will require absentee ballots to arrive by the end of poll closing. Tell us about that.
Thank you. Myself and Senator Gavarone joint sponsored this bill. There were two things in the bill that were major. We actually took it from a couple of our other bills, and we wanted to make sure this got into law before this primary. And so, Trump is pushing at the federal level that, guess what, Election Day is Election Day, and we shouldn't be getting votes way after Election Day. With the exception of the military overseas ballots, that should be true. So we basically wrote a bill that said all absentee ballots, with the exception of the military overseas ballots, shall be in on Election Day. And I think that has to do with the veterans or the overseas federal law that we kind of aligned it to. But we also gave the authority of the Secretary of State to do a better job of going through and verifying citizenship. And we also gave the authority for local elections officials. So if you're going in to vote and you've got an ID and it clearly shows that you're not a citizen, they can challenge you. And then now you will still cast your vote provisionally. It'll be set aside. They will verify that you're a citizen or not. And if you're not a citizen, the vote doesn't count. If you are a citizen, it counts. So we put that into law. When Governor DeWine signed it, I found out that morning he was going to sign it. I did not know until literally that morning he was going to sign it. There was question about whether he was. I talked to one of his staffers. Staffer told me, yep, he's going to sign it in 2 hours. Now, there wasn't a bill signing ceremony. And when he did sign it, he said, I wish I could veto this, but he went ahead and signed it. And I think this has to do with that he feels like, those ballots would have been fine coming in later. The problem is that also adds doubt. And if you're at the last minute, you've done the early voting and you know that you're behind, suddenly absentee ballots show up. We don't know. I mean, this has happened in other states. I think this clearly happened in Minnesota, and it looks like maybe Georgia and Pennsylvania. So to say that couldn't happen here under a Secretary of State, Allison Russo, not saying that she would do that, but there are enough operatives out there that would try to, I think, skew a election that these kind of things could happen, and we just need to make sure they don't. So having the absentees in on Election Day, we know that the ballots are there. Nobody else can try to truckload them in. And the other thing that changed here in the last year or so, the U.S. Post Office no longer postmarks the stuff the same day necessarily. They can hold the mail now a few days before they postmark it. So if you do want your absentee ballot in, you need to make sure that it's in even further earlier, because maybe they do wait until after that Tuesday to postmark it. That's not fair to you, and it's also not fair. So I think this is a good move. I think this was a good bill, and I'm glad it was signed into law.
So in your role as chair of the Education Committee, You have done some incredible things. That committee has helped get through some wonderful bills. Some I helped too. I testified for. You and I spoke a while back about how can we change things, the funding. What are you working on now that will help improve school funding? Because what we have now is not working. The schools funding themselves with levies is killing us on the property taxes. So what are your ideas on that?
To junk the entire system and start over. And myself, I'm actually working with several reps, Rep Lear, Rep Heiner, and Rep Dave Thomas, who are, we've got a couple others that we're talking with, but those we kind of formed a core group to come up with a new school funding formula to try to reduce taxes overall. So in Ohio, we spend in local, federal, and state dollars about $28 billion per year.
Wow.
If you count all funds. Half of the funds that we spend in the state are, in fact, property taxes. So of that $28 billion, about half of it comes from local property taxes. So what I'm suggesting, and I'm Mr. School Choice, I guess. The unions can't stand me, and they make sure of that every day on my Facebook page. If I post literally anything, if it's education, I'm getting hammered on it. So what I do is we eliminate all the local property taxes. I have the state assume all the existing bond debt because the state has a AAA bond rating. They can bond that out. I then use the existing school funding formula. So it adds all the categoricals. So if you're gifted, it has a base formula of what they think the cost would be, plus gifted and talented, economically disadvantaged, disability, and those disabilities are in different categories. So the more disabled you get, the more money you get. I keep that all in place. But I go to 120 mil statewide property tax. And then I convert the difference into a 1 3/4% sales tax. And doing that, I then have all the money. I eliminate the Ed Choice scholarships and all the school choice money. It gets thrown into the same pot, and 100% of the money follows the student back to whatever school they go to. Now, what this does, we have 611 school districts in Ohio. Most states, they're countywide school systems. So there's a lot of economic inefficiencies, but interestingly, the economic inefficiencies are on the bigger school districts.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask me why, but that's the way it's been. So here in Columbus, for instance, they're spending around $26,500 a student. East Cleveland, Youngstown, Jefferson Township, and Montgomery County, which is partially Dayton, they're spending $36,000 a student. A typical charter school is around $10,500 to $12,000 a student. Okay, and then so there's no competition, there's no desire. So what I do is I make all the money falls back to the district, but they have to cash flow, which means now they have to make tough decisions because those dollars are going to now be spent based on what's actually coming in. So if the kids start leaving, they lose all that money. And they're going to have to make better decisions. So Columbus Public has like 118 school buildings. They didn't want to close a bunch of them. Give you an example, Columbus Public has about 44,000 kids. Olentangy Local has 25,000 kids. Olentangy has about 31 school buildings. Yes, they're big buildings. But Columbus Public had 118, and they were complaining about closing 20 of them. They should have maybe 60 buildings. But it also, by doing this forces them to make tough decisions about closing buildings, reorganizing, actually doing things and working in cooperation with surrounding districts, because they'll have to now figure out maybe we can't afford all these school buses, and maybe we should synchronize bell schedules because they're not doing that now. There's union contracts. And I just learned this the other day. The union contracts that are out there will start the bells in some schools in the same district at 9 a.m. for elementary, but the bus routing, if you did it a different way, they might start at 8:40 or something, and you might have more efficient buses, but because of the union contract, they're stuck with additional buses and needing for more bus drivers, so that then they say they've got a bus driver shortage. When the reality is, you could restructure a lot of this. And under my bill, I regionalize all the school transportation. You still keep the same school districts. You can even put the names of the buses or the schools on the side of it. But you regionalize the transportation and force everybody to just kind of synchronize their bell schedules. This will also be required of the private schools. But I've talked to them. They're not even getting their kids picked up. Or in the middle of the day, the local school district who's paid to pick the kids up or drop them off will tell the local school, we can't pick them up or drop them off. So Senate Bill 93, it's a placeholder bill. I do have the sub bill. It's been sitting there. It's in Finance Committee. This is potentially a proposal that could be used as a baseline for something. Maybe in a Vivek can't, he may take parts of this, but I think the philosophy is then we put everybody under the same accountability system. So I'm sick of the unions complaining, well, the charter schools are under a different accountability system. All right, they all take the same standardized test, and it could be a norm reference test. I don't really care. As long as it's something we can measure and can measure apples to apples, my guess is then you will see what's going on, and you'll see that your dollars are better spent by letting the parent make the decision of putting your kid in a school that actually works for their kids.
So if that were to go through, here's a flaw that I see happening is almost every single school district has a policy that, let's say I'm in Hilliard School District and I want to put my kid in Dublin, not move, but I want them to go to Dublin schools. Dublin can say no.
Correct.
It's a closed enrollment.
Mm-hmm. Open versus closed.
Yes. So how would that issue play into your plan?
In my case, I would just let them still make their decisions because, again, they're now going to be based on cash flows. And if you do have school districts that are maxed out and have no capacity, and under my system, I could say one school district can now manage another. You can get private management to come in. You can do whatever you want from that standpoint. And I will tell you, there's charter school operators right now that could go into Columbus Public Schools and turn those schools around in a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the teachers will be better off, the students will be far better off, and you'll have better performance. That's not really happening now. And, I don't want to force kids to, or force a school district that's already at capacity to open up. I think we would probably still leave that in. I'd be fine with then at that point opening up and saying you have open enrollment permanent. But I think a lot of school districts would go that route because they know they would pick up a lot of kids. They could do shared services. There's a lot of things that under my bill and proposal, I just reopen it up and essentially let a quasi free market system take over it in a sense that the local boards will have to make better decisions because if they don't, they will be closing their doors. That's not happening now. And in fact, we actually have a school closure law that only impacts charter schools. It does not impact traditional public schools. But if you have the money follow the student, those districts will have to make decisions quickly, not like what they're doing now. And they may have to even make decisions mid-school year that they don't want to make, but it's in the best interest of the students. And that's really what I'm looking for is better student results.
Well, and I think if we got rid of the unions, that would be even better.
I think that's a good point.
Yes, absolutely. Senator Brenner had a question real quick, sir. So you said the money follows the student. Okay, we have myself and several other folks who are paying taxes who don't have a student. Would we have a say in that?
Well, you elect your representatives, so that would be us.
Well,
but
yes,
no,
I mean, like for example, if the money follows the student goes to whatever school, charter school or public school, whatever, there's a choice there. So for people who don't have a student, would there be a choice for those of us who don't have a student to send our money to somewhere of our choosing?
No, this is only funding students that exist in the state. And you got to remember, since the pandemic, there's been a 5% decline in enrollment in traditional public schools since 2020.
Okay.
That's been about 1% a year, and it's continuing to fall. Homeschooling has gone up. We would have mechanisms in place that homeschoolers could tap into it. I don't want just money going to a homeschooler, quote unquote, and then they just launder the money. There's got to be some checks and balances there. So the money that we have, it's going to be auditable, and it is right now to the school levels. And, those audits would have to continue. I mean, we do audit Ed Choice scholarships. Whatever anybody says, if a Catholic school receives kids who are on an Ed Choice scholarship, those Ed Choice scholarships are verified. We verify those kids go there. If they don't, that money isn't funded, and it's just that simple. This would also happen in the traditional public schools. So we're funding a kid for $36,000 a year, yet only 30% of them are passing English or math. Well, guess what? Maybe all those kids will leave. You'll lose the revenue. You'll have to consolidate and shut down part of your schools or reorganize them, and you'll have to make the decisions that you're not making now because you're heavily subsidized by suburban districts and rural districts. So I think this is what has to happen. Milton Friedman talked about this 50 years ago, and we've been moving in that direction. I mean, this expansion of universal ed choice was really the first time, and then a couple years ago when we expanded charter schools to go wherever they need to in the state. But again, traditional public schools do monopolistic type of things, like they've got a vacant school instead of, and Senate Bill 311, we've got an omnibus bill. We're working on some transportation stuff we may put in it. They will deliberately leave an empty school building sitting there. It starts falling apart. Remember, taxpayer dollars paid for these buildings. Instead of putting it up for sale to a charter school, they'll let the thing sit there, fall apart, and then they have to tear it down. Meanwhile, it could have been opened up as a charter school. This goes on all the time in Ohio. It's happened here in Columbus. It's Cleveland. You name any major city, it's happened there. And it's unfortunate because it's a waste of taxpayer money and the potential for, a good charter school to come in there with an operator. And by the way, all this idea that there's no accountability, we changed those laws 12 years ago. We updated the laws for charter schools. The operators now shut down the bad ones. If they're getting on those, couple stars or 1 star, they're closing them, reorganizing them, or moving those kids to other schools. So that does go on there. Does not go on in traditional public schools.
I want to ask you, we saw many, and locally here and all across the state of Ohio, so many videos of these wild, unhinged walkouts protesting ICE. And, I mean, behavior amongst these kids that you felt like the teachers themselves were encouraging, hooligan, mob-like behavior, threatening parents who questioned the tactics of the schools, parents who came there to pull their kids out because they would be damned if their child is going to get caught up in the... And by the way, can we be honest here? How many of those kids even know what the hell they're protesting or fundamentally how it works? Very few. But I watched this. Who is going to hold these schools accountable, Senator Brenner? These weren't just, okay, walk out for 5 minutes peacefully, show solidarity, go back. These were your paid Antifa, George Soros, riot-type mentality walkouts. And I want the schools to be held accountable. I want the damn teachers to be held accountable because it was some of the most grotesque, ridiculous behavior I have ever seen, not only by the students, but by the teachers who pushed it and encouraged it. Who and how can we hold these school districts accountable?
You have to have the money follow the students so that they lose the money. I mean, that's the bottom line. And this was atrocious. I totally agree. It's atrocious. And I wanted to pull this up because I'm part of the Ohio Construction Facilities Commission as a non-voting member for the Senate. I just joined that this last year. So they had one of their meetings at one of the schools here up in Indianola. It's one of the top schools in Columbus. This is the stuff, and I'll show you guys, and if you want to pass this around, but this was what was on the wall.
The Marxist lens, critical race lens.
Yep, that's the stuff that was on the walls, and this was in the school. So, and then you've got LGBTQ flags everywhere in the school building. Now you have American flags in there, but I was shocked when I go around and I see that stuff on the wall.
That's a transgender pride flag right there.
Yes.
Senator Brenner, can you send it to me, please?
I can send it to you.
Well, later, of course.
We'll do that. So these walkouts, that wasn't a surprise to me because the teachers, everybody else is teaching, critical math and reading and everything else in science. Apparently, we're just indoctrinating kids. Kids are juveniles. They're under adult supervision. They shouldn't be walking out of anything. Now, if you're 18, okay, fine. But again, if you're in a school paid for by taxpayer dollars, that's their responsibility of the school for those kids to stay in there. They should not be encouraging them to go out. Now, if they want to go out and protest on their own, feel free. But after school, on their own time, not on the taxpayer's dime. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the problem is, and that's where I think these teachers have lost sight. If we started putting up Make America Great Again flags in all the schools, and I was thinking about introducing a bill to require that, to put a Make America Great Again flag up in every school classroom, I'm sure there would be a little protest or two coming from the other side.
Of course, yeah.
But, and they say, well, and so this is the other thing that I have. So a lot of people say, well, it's local control. They should do it because their local school system said this is what they want. This is what the community wants. Yes, but it's one public school system in Ohio. Every kid should be able to learn without having to be pushed some sort of political agenda on them. And again, I don't have a problem if they want to talk about, foreign policy or some other issues that are going on in a social studies class. It's age appropriate. But, I'm looking at this stuff. I think this was the middle school. What is this doing on the walls? This should not be on the walls. These kind of things should not be just hanging in there. And, these flags, they should not be in there. If the teachers want to go after school and protest and hold up the flag on their own, great, go do it. You got a First Amendment right to do that. But not inside the classroom. And I think this is where we've lost a lot of, common sense.
How are they getting away with it? Why are they allowed to do this? I don't understand why these teachers aren't being punished. Are you telling me it's all because the union will come in and protect them and say that
That's
this
a big
is...
part of it.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
And the local school boards. I'm sorry. But I would guess, if you could look at Westerville, Columbus, every one of those school boards is controlled by left-wing Democrats.
Absolutely.
They're not going to enforce anything that the Republicans want to push because it's local control. And they're just going to basically invalidate the state law by ignoring it. And
So take away their money.
Well, thank you. And I think this is why, again, school choice and everything, all the money follow the student. I mean, we're having problems with transportation. They're not transporting the kids. Literally, Columbus Public 2 years ago put in, and they said, oh, no, we didn't. No, you budgeted $17 million to pay state fines instead of transporting the kids on time. They literally put it in the Columbus, their $1 billion budget, but I'm sorry, $17 million is more than a lot of school systems pay or have for their whole budgets. And you budgeted that to not then transport the kids? And they were talking about eliminating the busing for the high school here, and I don't know if Columbus Public did then or not for next school year. I think maybe I made a couple threats that maybe if they do that, the state average chronic absentee rate in our schools is 26%. Columbus Public last school year, not during the pandemic, was 54%. These kids aren't going to learn there anyway because they're not in the school.
Well, even in Hilliard, and I went through this with my son, you could show up one day the entire school year. As long as you've turned in the assignments and earned the credits, you can graduate.
That's absurd. That's absolutely nauseating.
That's teaching people then that they don't have to go to work.
Exactly.
And work, so,
Well, philosophically, and Senator Brenner, and I know this is more like an existential kind of a question with no real answer, but where do we need to go to weed out these activists, propagandizing teachers who get access to classrooms where they're not there to teach whatever subject they're in. They're there to brainwash. They're there to manipulate. They're literally there to get their shove their philosophy, as warped as it is, upon these kids. So that by the time they get, and we're starting now in elementary school, junior high, as we just saw those pictures of Marxism and critical race nonsense. By the time they get out of high school, it's a lost cause by then because they've had 12 years of indoctrination. What is there anything to do that we can fundamentally weed out these corrupt activist teachers?
The problem is when the head of the NEA is such a left-wing progressive lunatic that she's managed to recruit, half the teacher workforces is. I'm not saying they're lunatics, but there's a large chunk of the teachers in general. So you have to either change the ethics standards and say, teachers, if you're in a classroom, these are the standards you must follow, and if you don't, we're going to remove your license or suspend you or do something like that and change some of those laws. But then I'm sure we would get a lawsuit, probably end up in court. I'm guessing the ACLU would probably file some suit along with the unions that get drug out. This is why we got to continue to win the courts. But we also need to go and add R's and D's. We got to chip away at this. This has been built up for 50 years. Dewey started the modern classroom in the late 1800s. So we're at a point where we as Republicans need to start chipping away at literally every aspect of what they've done. So put an R&D at the end of the name of candidates running for school board is a start. Doesn't mean all our Republicans will actually be that right there, but at least you've got something to start there. So you at least put people on the boards who have at least some oversight there. And then they can put in, proper administrators and then let the administrators also administrate. That's the other problem. The administrators, because of union contracts, their hands are tied on a lot of things.
Yep.
So they can't make the changes that may be needed. Maybe there's teachers that need discipline and they just can't do it. So there's some things here that I think need to happen and I think will happen in the coming weeks. I believe in the next administration for sure, that I think will help improve our schools. And like Vivek, and he's talked, he doesn't want to denigrate anybody. He wants to lift, rising tide lifts all boats. But we've got to bring common sense back to our schools, and we got to put in some rules and regulations and stuff that will make the schools work better, get back to, the science of reading, get back to, math that works, and, teach the basics.
But there also has to be accountability.
Yep.
And I fought really hard for the Parents' Rights Bill, HB 8, but there's no teeth to it. So this is why you saw on the walls what you saw, because there's no punishment. So I'm hoping down the road they get caught violating that. To me, what you saw on that school is a violation of the Parents' Rights Bill. So they should get their funding revoked.
Yeah, but again, the schools. I mean, Columbus built in $17 million to pay fines instead of transporting the kids on time.
Right.
I mean, that's my concern. This is why we have this discussion. We can claw the money back, then they'll just complain the legislature just stole our money, and then it's a lie. But
why do you want to deny children an education, Senator Brenner? Answer the question, Senator.
We could talk for hours about education, but let's talk about a couple other things. You mentioned before about fraud, and we've talked about Minnesota, and someone sent me a screenshot that says Ohio Rhino Governor DeWine and Senator Brenner signed off on giving the Somali Community Link Center $2.26 million in taxpayer funds.
Yeah, that was a lovely one. Was it Bridget whatever, I think, who texted that?
Yeah.
So I've got a primary, and I'm running for an open seat for the Ohio House. And so what's happened is somebody who doesn't want me over there, this could have even been funded, for all I know, by teachers' unions who don't want me over there. So let's just make stuff up. And since the left makes stuff up, who knows? This might have been coming from them. But what happened was the stuff that they were saying, there was a text message that went out referencing a bunch of bills. They were the budget bills, the general operating budget bills. And one of them, I think, was a capital budget bill. And there's funding in under block grant TANF money, and I happen to also have a screenshot of that, which is just general revenue fund. So I voted for the budget, therefore I gave the Somalis money. That's the reason that's going on there for that entire thing that led to that. In fact, the photo of the bill signing they're showing wasn't even the bill signing that had anything to do with any of those bills. But it was put out there. In fact, the thing that went out didn't even have a disclaimer on it. These were text messages that were hitting in my district, attacking me on this. This was based on a bunch of bills. And we looked up the bills and we're like, oh, these are budget bills. And then we ended up looking up the actual, the documents themselves. And I actually I downloaded the actual, and it was like TANF line items from the operating budget. And when we looked at them, we're like, okay, well, yes, but that's actually given out through the Department of Job and Family Services. And they do have rules and regulations in place for how that money goes out. In this case, it was, I think, a Somali community center. And guess what? There's a lot of Somali families that immigrated here or are here maybe legally or illegally or through some visa. They're in Columbus at the result of Mayor Coleman when he was here, bringing them all here. Well, there's a community center there, and yes, they got some money for these programs. So that went out, goes out and says that, I'm behind it, and no, I voted for the budget bill. Was that in there? Yes, but I also voted for the tax cuts that were also in there. I also voted for the school funding and school choice expansion. So, and also, by the way, every Republican voted for that, so not just me. So maybe they should be taking a look at that. But no, this is the kind of dirty politics that goes out there. And that happened in the last week. We were already looking at it. We're like, this is insane because they're associating something to me as if I'm the one that was behind the Somali money getting there to begin with. And again, this was TANF general block grant money that went out to, and the way Ohio does it, and this is different, even getting back to the Somali stuff and the stuff in Minnesota, at least in Ohio, you have to actually be enrolled, but beyond enrollment, which is all they check for in Minnesota, you actually have to drop the kid off and pick them up and check them in an app. And when you do that, then that entity is paid. Now, I did hear that last year, and I think this was reported, there were 7,200 of those apps had to be reset because maybe the daycare centers had those numbers and were logging the kids in and out. We don't know. I think there is an investigation going on that.
So they are working on that at the State House?
And we're working to see, and I've been talking with Auditor Keith Faber. He's done actually, I think, a great job trying to give us ideas. We put some stuff in the budget this last year that gives him more authority to try to root out these type of problems. And we're going to look to see what else we can do to try to do that. I think there's a couple House bills right now. I think, again, Josh Williams, maybe Dave Thomas are working on those. I think we're going to have some bills go through that will add more teeth. That is definitely needed because that kind of stuff needs to stop. We can't be funding things that don't exist. We can't be doing things to fund, corrupt organizations, and we need to give enough teeth to our law enforcement and attorney general to be able to go claw that back and put people in jail who are committing crimes. And if we do that, I think this stuff will clear up. But again, Ohio can do some of this, but we got to make sure that, like what happened during the pandemic, where they just block granted a bunch of money and said, oh, by the way, there's no strings attached, and if you try to do it, you can't. They tied our hands back then. That we got to make sure that our people in Congress are elected, that they're Republicans who want to see oversight and control. Otherwise, you're going to have Tim Walz in charge of distributing the money.
So what are the three biggest problems facing Ohio that most of us don't know about?
Don't know about? I think we know quite a few of them. That's a good question. I've talked about government bureaucracy, but I think people know most of the problems. They see them every day, whether it's, school funding issues or you see the, union problems in government. I think probably just trying to keep Ohio competitive, we need to be moving at a faster pace. Which means we need to cut more bureaucracy. We need to reduce government. We need to, consolidate government entities. We have like 6,000 different government entities with the different layers if you add them all up, from health districts to the various taxing districts that are out there. We need to be looking at ways to make ourselves streamline and cut those costs. And I think there's a lot of people that don't want to go there. They'll say they want reduced government, but when you say, if I were to say, well, we're going to go to 88 school districts versus 611, well, I'm sure the people here in Franklin County who aren't in Columbus Public Schools do not want to merge with Columbus Public. So you got to find a way to be able to get them to cooperate in a way that improves the system. And same with these other government entities, to try to do more collaboration with resources so that you're shrinking government, not growing it. And I think one way you do that is you continue to cut taxes at the state level, and you continue to cut taxes at the local level. So if we can reduce those property taxes, and this is the thing that's given us an opportunity that's sitting out there, is that property tax repeal bill. That could give and open up, I think, the ability for the state to say, okay, what do we really need to keep our operations working? And I think that's something that if we put it in play, it could potentially work out in our favor, and we could be able to reduce government substantially to be competitive with Texas, Florida, a large chunk of states that are still doing much better than we are. But I think we've been uncovering a lot of the issues that I think people know. I think Ohio, though, is a great state. We've got a lot of great resources that we haven't tapped. I think that this idea that this electrical grid problem and, these data centers, I don't think that's a problem. We got plenty of energy. We just passed, it was a House Bill 15 that was signed into law. That's going to allow better transmission of electricity, ability for these big data centers to have their own power plants so that don't strain our grid. There's a lot of things that we are doing that I think is a positive for the state. Going back to the science of rating, finally, that took us years to do that. We went back to that. So there's a lot of positives, I think, that are helping our state. And the fact that we did go to a flat income tax last year. I mean, we are now the lowest income taxed state in the region. That makes us more competitive, and it helps our Ohioans and helps grow the economy. And I just came over from I was in Coshocton, a lot of growth going on over there that hasn't happened in years. So that's going to help their tax base out. I represent that area right now, and it's those are positive things. So I think that's maybe something that Ohioans need to know is that we have tons of potential. It's growing, and I think that we have a way to unlock even more of it. If we have a lot more reforms coming, especially in government.
So one last thing I wanted to talk about, and you mentioned how you're getting attacked on your posts about education especially. And I've been watching your wife's Facebook page, and what a fighter she is. She is an inspiration, I do believe. But what's really sad about how you're being treated by the Delaware County GOP, what a poop show that is, number one. And number two, it really frustrates me, the lack of unity. Republicans are killing ourselves all because of our own ideology. So do you want to explain what's going on and set people straight a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm running for state rep. Some people didn't want that. They didn't want Rep Lear, so we have term limits, but the term limits in the Ohio Constitution say that once your term is up, you can run for the other chamber. I wasn't planning to. I didn't know that Rep Lear was going to run for state senate. She did. It left an opening, so I'm running for the state rep seat. I talked to some people, and I think I'll carry a lot of experience on a conservative side that will help the House, because the House has been divided since Householder was there. Actually, it was divided before that. But there's a lot of fighting within the Republican ranks all over the state. And in my county, it's gotten really bad. We had a group of people that came into leadership that said they wanted transparency, and they've done anything but be transparent. And so then we had a couple people that basically, I don't get what they did. I mean, they kind of turned on us. And they attack me. Okay, fine, attack me on whatever you want. But then like a week ago, they go after my wife. I mean, they start putting stuff up that was just absolutely shameful. And this one, Defend Delaware, it's a fake PAC. And if anybody's actually seen anything that says Defend Delaware, it was created to designed to destroy me and or Beth and or Rep Lear or others that they don't like. The money was funded by one particular person, at least so far. The only donation I saw was in there was by Kathy Nelson. And my wife called her out on it, especially after she was attacked. We didn't say anything up until that point. These people also happen to be backing my opponent. And then so I asked him, why don't you post something that says, you at least condemn those attacks on the spouse. We texted on that a week ago. I'm still waiting by crickets for him to reply or post anything. But, I mean, some of that's politics, but it's gotten vicious. These are Republicans doing this, or conservatives allegedly doing this against. Let's save this for November. Go after the Democrats and Amy Acton, who basically tried to wreck the damn state.
Exactly.
There are. I'll put it this way, and I'm going to be polite because I don't want to put words in the mouth of of the people we're referring to or whatever. I think there are people that have their own self-interest in mind above the movement, above the good of the state of Ohio. And I feel like that has like a brain worm just done something to them to where instead of fighting for us, instead of fighting for the things that they know we care about, they're fighting for themselves. And I think that is a damn shame when you consider all that is at stake in this state right now.
That's exactly right. And that's kind of where it's gone. There's some... Well, there's people that's just come in here that hasn't even done anything. I mean, they've been only involved for the last couple of years. I was doing the Tea Party stuff back in 2007 or 9 or whenever those first rallies were at the State House. I mean, I've been in this thick and through. I was the only one in 2016 who stood up on a stage supporting Donald J. Trump for the general election in our county. And now, you got people, it's like, wait, no, we need to be coming together we need to be pulling people together, be transparent, be open. You may disagree with, some of my policies. Great, then argue that. But don't go after me or go after my wife personally. That's just uncalled for. That's what's happening. And then not only that, we got people trying to rig things in Delaware. I mean, they just sent out an email to the state central committee saying, we don't want you to endorse anybody in our county because this, well, wait, the county party never said that. They never actually voted on that. The executive committee never did. It was just a couple members of the party leadership that sent that to the state central committee. So it's like, wait a minute, you weren't really authorized to do it, but you're going ahead and do it. Now, if you want to personally go out there and stand and say that, okay, fine. But you're acting as if you're the party doing this, and that's also not right. And those kind of things are going on. But, I mean, this has happened in Delaware. This has happened in Butler, Warren, the hard, deep red counties where you've got a lot of political infighting goes on. That goes on, and it's going on. This is the worst I've seen it, though, in Delaware County. And I got to tell you, if this fighting continues, we're going to have a hard time winning November elections.
Indeed. All right, Senator Brenner, hopefully soon to be State Rep Brenner.
That's right.
Thanks.
If anybody would like to help your campaign via donations or boots on the ground, how can they do that?
Thank you very much. AndrewBrenner.com. You can go to that website. You can donate. You can sign up. You can email me directly, Andy at Brenner for Ohio, and that's BRENNER, the digit 4, Ohio.com, Andy at BrennerForOhio.com. And you can call my cell phone or text me, and I'm going to give this out. And yes, I give this out.
This is brave. Now, this is what government was meant to be.
740-602-5033. And, you can reach out that way. Go to the website. I'm on Facebook as well, Andrew Brenner. I'm also on Twitter, Andrew Brenner, and I think Brenner for Ohio on both of those. So you can follow me on those. Send me messages. I check it. And actually, I'm the one checking. If it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook. I'm checking. I do have somebody else check the stuff on Facebook occasionally. But just reach out that way. I appreciate the support. I think once I can get through a primary, I'm not as worried about the general. I'm worried about the general for the top of our ticket of the state, and I will be working to get them elected because it's important that we do not let the left take over those offices, because if they do, we're going to be in such severe trouble that, it will be, if Amy Acton gets elected governor, it would be a disaster. I think Sherrod Brown, if he were to get elected, then I think we lose control of the U.S. Senate. That would be a disaster. We know darn well that Trump will get impeached and then probably try to be prosecuted immediately.
Yep.
So the listeners absolutely need to be engaged, making sure that the Republicans win and that we put our best foot forward to win in November. And if we don't do that, we will end up losing the state to far left progressives who will do nothing but put Marxism and communism and
who have also threatened to basically round up all the MAGA fighters and throw them in jail. They've literally come out and said that they are going to do that. So this is why it's very important. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. It was very nice to meet you in person.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this has been Straight Shot Politics. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube. Like us, follow us, and share it with your friends. This has been Straight Shot Politics.